Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive with us.
Always excited to be back.
So today we're tackling something pretty big.
Yeah, this is a big one.
We're looking at a whole year's worth of blog posts from Dr. Howard Knopf.
He's an education expert, right?
Right. Yeah, he's been writing these bi-monthly blogs for like a decade now.
So he's definitely got a good grasp on what's happening in education.
Exactly. And what I love about these posts
Yeah,
is that they're not just like dry summaries,
right.
you know? He's got personality, he's got opinions, he rants a little sometimes.
I mean, 10 years of blogs, that's got to build up some opinion.
Sure, and that makes it so much more engaging to read.
Way more interesting than your typical, end-of-year review.
So to help us unpack all this and really make sense of it all,
Yeah,
we have our expert here with us.
happy to be here.
And I think this is going to be really valuable for anyone in the education world, no matter what their role is.
Oh, absolutely. These themes are so relevant.
Okay, so let's dive into theme number 1. This is school improvement.
Right.
And Dr. Knopf is a big believer that schools need to be constantly evolving.
Which makes sense. The world is changing so rapidly, especially
Especially in the last 10 years.
Exactly. Yeah. Think about how different things were 10 years ago. It's crazy.
So one of the things that Dr. Knopf talks about is the need for what he calls Moneyball thinking in education.
Moneyball, like the movie.
Like the movie about baseball. Yeah.
Yeah.
How does that apply to schools?
It's a really fascinating analogy, actually. So in the movie The Oakland A's,
Right.
they built this amazing team on a super tight budget.
They did.
And they did it by looking at data in a completely new way.
Interesting.
Instead of just relying on traditional scouting methods or, gut feelings,
Right.
they actually looked at the statistics that could really predict wins, like on-base percentage.
Oh, interesting.
So Dr. Knopf's argument is that schools should do the same thing. Like figure out what data points actually matter for student success and then use that data to make better decisions.
So it's not just about collecting data, it's about using it strategically.
Exactly. And he really pushes back against just looking at standardized test scores.
Okay.
He suggests things like, tracking student engagement,
Okay.
the quality of classroom discussions,
Interesting.
how well students can apply what they've learned to real-world problems.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, he actually has this framework called the 7 Sure Solutions.
7 Sure Solutions. That sounds pretty promising.
It is. It's very practical. It gives a roadmap for schools to implement these data-driven approaches.
Okay, so is it all just tests and numbers, though?
Not at all, actually. He's very clear about that the goal is true student mastery,
Okay.
not just good test scores.
Right.
He wants kids to really understand the material and be able to use it in their lives.
I like that.
He even compares it to training for the Olympics.
Oh, wow.
You need courage, you need careful preparation, you need focused conditioning.
So school improvement at an Olympic level.
Well, that's a good question because he does acknowledge that the speed of change needs to vary.
Okay.
Some things like shifting mindsets or building a collaborative culture,
Right.
those need to happen slowly and deliberately.
Yeah.
But other things, like responding to a crisis or adopting a new evidence-based practice,
Okay.
might require faster action.
So it really depends.
It depends on the situation and the outcome you're going for.
And who's responsible for leading all these changes?
That's where shared leadership comes in.
Okay.
He believes that decisions should be made collaboratively.
So teachers, administrators, students?
Students, parents, everyone has a voice.
Interesting.
It creates a much more empowered school community.
I can see that.
And then there's the question of grades.
Yeah. Are they still the most important thing?
That's something he's actually concerned about.
Yeah.
He talks a lot about grade inflation and how it can mask whether students are truly mastering the skills they need. We need to focus less on grades and more on whether students can apply their knowledge and solve problems.
Yeah, preparing them for life beyond school, not just for the report card.
Exactly.
So we've talked about how schools can improve, but what about choosing the programs they implement?
Ooh, yeah, that's a whole other challenge.
Right, because there are so many programs out there all promising amazing results.
It's overwhelming, honestly.
It really is. How do you know which ones actually work?
And that leads us perfectly into theme 2.
Okay, theme 2, choosing effective programs.
Yes.
And I feel like Dr. Knopf is pretty passionate about this one.
Oh, he is. It's understandable, though.
Yeah, because it's like being bombarded with those flashy Super Bowl commercials.
I was just thinking that.
They all look amazing, but do they live up to the hype?
Exactly. And that's exactly what Dr. Knopf warns us about.
Okay.
Don't fall for the marketing hype without looking at the evidence.
So we need to be savvy consumers.
Yes. Think of it like buying a car.
Okay.
You wouldn't buy a car just based on a flashy ad.
No, you do your research.
You'd look under the hood, you'd take it for a test drive.
So how do we do that with educational programs?
He provides this great framework for evaluating programs, and it really comes down to demanding evidence.
Evidence, okay.
Ask tough questions like, what research supports this program's effectiveness?
Sure.
How was the data collected? Does it align with our specific needs and goals?
So it's not just about best practices.
He actually encourages us to move beyond best practices.
Okay.
And focus on effective practices.
What does that mean?
It means what works best in your specific context, backed by research.
That makes sense.
Not every best practice is going to work for every school or every student.
Right.
And it's important to think about what happens when schools choose programs that aren't effective.
Yeah, what's the impact?
It can really hurt teacher morale.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine putting all your time and energy into something that doesn't work.
Yeah, that's demoralizing.
It is, and it can make teachers resistant to trying new things.
I can see that.
And then you're also wasting valuable resources and time.
So choosing the right programs is about more than just academic outcomes.
Absolutely.
It's about the whole school climate and teacher well-being.
Exactly, and that ties into critical thinking.
Okay.
We need to be aware of our own biases and how they can influence our decisions.
Biases. How so?
Well, everyone has these unconscious beliefs, these cognitive biases.
Right.
And they can affect how we perceive information and make choices even in education.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Imagine a teacher who believes that girls are better at reading than boys.
Okay.
Now, that teacher might unintentionally give girls more praise or attention during reading lessons.
Even if the boys are doing just as well.
Right. And that can lead to the boys feeling discouraged and disengaging from reading.
Wow, that's an interesting point.
It's about being aware of those biases, seeking feedback from others, and actively challenging our own assumptions.
So how do we apply that to choosing programs?
Well, he talks a lot about media literacy for educators.
So it's not just for students anymore.
Not at all. We need it too, especially when it comes to social media.
Oh, yeah, social media can be a minefield.
He actually compares social media to the sword of Damocles.
The sword of Damocles. Okay, I'm not familiar.
It's this mythical sword hanging by a thread over someone's head.
Okay.
It represents the potential dangers of social media.
Interesting.
It can be a powerful tool for communication and learning.
Right.
But it can also be a source of distraction, misinformation, and even harm.
So like that sword, it has the potential for both good and bad.
Exactly. And that's why he emphasizes self-control, responsible use, even applying public relations principles.
When we're on social media.
Think before you post. Be mindful of your audience and represent yourself professionally.
That makes a lot of sense. It reminds me of all the challenges students are facing these days.
Absolutely.
Especially when it comes to mental health and well-being.
Yeah, that's a huge topic right now, and it's something Dr. Knopf addresses head on.
So that leads us into theme 3.
Yes, student engagement behavior and mental health.
This is a big one.
It is. We're seeing more absenteeism, more behavioral issues, and of course, the mental health crisis.
And Dr. Knopf doesn't just talk about these issues. He actually offers solutions.
Yeah, he gives concrete strategies, not just vague suggestions.
Okay, well, let's dive into that in part 2 of this deep dive.
Sounds good.
It sounds like Dr. Knopf has a lot to say about how schools can support students.
Oh, yeah, he does. So we were talking about Dr. Knopf's focus on student well-being.
Right, and how he doesn't just, point out the problems.
He actually offers solutions.
Real solutions. Yeah, so what are some of those solutions?
Well, one thing that really stood out to me is his emphasis on having those classroom conversations.
Conversations about what?
About challenging topics. The things that can be tough to talk about in school.
Like race and religion and current events.
Exactly, those kinds of things. And Dr. Knopf argues that those conversations are essential.
But they could be so hard to navigate.
Right, and that's why he gives educators a framework, a step-by-step guide.
Oh, that's helpful.
It covers things like establishing ground rules. Okay.
Creating a safe space for sharing perspectives.
Right.
And teaching students how to engage in dialogue respectfully, even when they disagree.
Which is so important these days.
Absolutely.
So it's one thing to say we should have those conversations.
Yeah.
But it's another thing to know how to actually do it.
Exactly. And he also talks about the trends in student mental health.
This is the big one, right?
It is. And he doesn't sugarcoat it. He cites data from the CDC.
Yeah, I've seen that report. Pretty alarming stuff.
It is increasing rates of anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts.
It's heartbreaking.
It is. And that's why he offers those practical strategies for schools to implement.
Like what kinds of strategies?
Well, he talks about multi-tiered systems of support for mental health.
Oh, like we have for academics.
Exactly. It's about providing a range of services and interventions
Okay.
from universal supports like mental health literacy for all students
Okay.
to more targeted interventions for those who need more help.
So it's about having a system in place to catch students who are struggling. Yes, and providing the right level of support.
It's not one size fits all.
Definitely not. And he also talks about addressing behavior proactively.
Okay, so instead of just reacting to misbehavior.
Right, you teach students the skills they need to manage their emotions.
To make good choices.
Exactly. Things like conflict resolution, self-regulation, empathy.
So social emotional learning.
Yes, and he's a big proponent of that. But remember, he's also critical of ineffective SEL programs.
Right. He wants to see real results.
Exactly. He wants SEL programs that are grounded in research.
Okay.
And that teach those specific social skills that kids can use every day.
So not just talking about empathy, but actually teaching kids how to understand other people's feelings.
Exactly how to respond to those feelings, how to resolve conflicts.
Communication skills.
All of these are essential life skills.
It's about preparing them for the real world.
Absolutely. And we haven't even touched on his deep dive into Title IX and sexual harassment.
Oh, wow, that's a heavy topic.
It is, but it's so important, and Dr. Denkstoff doesn't shy away from it.
What does he have to say about it?
He emphasizes both the legal and psychological aspects.
Okay.
He talks about how schools can respond to allegations in a way that's legally sound, but also trauma-informed.
So protecting students, but also ensuring fairness.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance, but it's crucial.
And what about preventing sexual harassment in the first place?
That's key, too. He talks about creating a school culture that doesn't tolerate harassment.
Okay.
Teaching students about healthy relationships, boundaries, consent.
That makes sense. It's all connected, isn't it?
It is, and it makes me think about all the challenges students face, like trauma.
Does Dr. Knopf talk about that?
He does. He discusses social-emotional screeners and the impact of ACEs.
Adverse childhood experiences.
Right, and he encourages schools to be trauma-informed.
Creating a more sensitive environment.
Exactly, but he also cautions against assuming that every student who struggles has experienced trauma.
Right, it's about seeing the whole child.
Absolutely, and he raises a really interesting question about parental responsibility.
I can be controversial.
He uses a real-life example, a school shooting in Michigan.
Oh, wow.
Where the mother was actually found guilty of involuntary manslaughter.
For what?
For failing to address her son's mental health issues.
Wow. That's a heavy example.
It is, but it highlights how complex this issue is.
And how interconnected families and schools are.
Exactly. And that brings us to Dr. Knopf's final theme for 2024.
Okay, what's that?
Improving services for students with disabilities.
Special education.
Yes. And one thing that sets him apart is his challenge to the traditional separation between general and special education.
You mean the idea that students with disabilities should be in separate classrooms?
Exactly. He believes that most students with disabilities can thrive in general ed setting.
With the right supports.
Of course, and he advocates for a more inclusive model.
What does that look like?
Special ed teachers working as consultants and co-teachers.
Supporting general ed teachers.
Exactly. It's a more seamless continuum of support.
Instead of separating students into different categories.
Right, and he outlines a bunch of recommendations for improving special ed services.
Like what?
More professional development for teachers ensuring access to high-quality instruction. Involving families as partners.
They sound like great recommendations.
They are. But he also talks about the barriers that need to be broken down.
Between general and special ed.
Yes, he identifies 5 columns of barriers.
5 columns? What are they?
Differences in beliefs, policies, procedures, practices.
Oh, so it's about more than just physical spaces.
Absolutely. It's about changing mindsets and systems.
That's a big challenge.
It is, but he believes we need to change the culture of schools to be more inclusive.
For all learners.
Yes, and one of the key tools he emphasizes is MTSS.
Multi-tiered systems of supports.
You got it.
I've heard of that, but can you explain how it works?
Sure, think of it like a pyramid.
Okay.
At the bottom is Tier 1, high-quality instruction, universal supports for everyone.
Okay.
Then Tier 2, more targeted interventions for those who need a little extra help.
And then Tier 3.
The most intensive supports for students with significant needs.
So it's about providing the right level of support at the right time.
Exactly, and using data to drive those decisions.
Data again.
He's all about the data, but he also recognizes that MTSS can be tricky to implement.
I can imagine getting everyone on board. takes work.
It does, and he actually uses a pretty strong term to describe what happens when MTSS isn't implemented correctly.
What's that?
Educational malpractice.
Wow, that's serious.
It is. He's not messing around when it comes to supporting students.
I like that about him. He's passionate.
He is. And to give us a glimpse into what it's really like to work in education, he shares this anecdote about a particularly crazy day in his life as a school psychologist.
Oh, I'd love to hear about that.
He describes a day that includes a visit to the laundromat, a due process conference call, and a really challenging day working in a rural school district.
It's a reminder that educators are real people.
With real lives and real challenges.
It's not all about data and policies.
No, it's about people, and I think that's what makes Dr. Knopf's work so compelling.
He never loses sight of the human element.
You're right. He's passionate about education, but he's also compassionate.
Towards educators and students.
Exactly.
So we've covered a lot with Dr. Knopf's 2024 blog posts.
We have. It's been a whirlwind.
What are some of the key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think the biggest one is the need for schools to be data-driven and evidence-based.
He talks about that a lot.
He does. He wants to see schools using data to track progress, identify needs, evaluate programs.
But it's not just about the numbers.
No, it's also about those strong relationships, effective communication, and student well-being.
You want schools to be both academically rigorous and emotionally supportive.
Exactly. And I hope our listeners come away feeling informed and empowered.
To make a difference.
Yes, whether they're teachers, administrators, parents, or just concerned citizens, we all have a role to play.
I love that. And I think Dr. Knopf's final message really captures that.
You mean his question about June?
Yes. June will be here in 6 months, one way or the other, if you have a choice to act now or in June to improve your school or educational setting on behalf of your students or clients. Which one will you choose?
Powerful stuff.
It's a call to action. He's challenging us to make a choice.
To be agents of change.
And that's a great place to wrap up this part of our deep dive.
Agreed.
Let's take a break and come back to reflect on that question and what it means for all of us. Okay, so we've spent a lot of time with Dr. Knopf's 2024 blog posts.
Yeah, a whole year's worth.
And it's clear he's got strong opinions on pretty much everything.
Oh, yeah, he doesn't hold back.
But you know what really stands out to me is his focus on action. He's not just, pointing out problems.
Right, he wants to see solutions.
He wants to see change, and he's giving us the tools to make it happen.
Yeah, he provides those practical strategies, those frameworks, even personal stories to inspire us.
And it all comes back to that question he ends with.
Oh, yeah, the one about June.
Right. June will be here in 6 months, one way or the other.
Yeah.
If you have a choice to act now or in June to improve your school or educational setting on behalf of your students or clients, which one will you choose?
Wow, that's a powerful question.
It is. It's a real call to action.
It makes you think, what am I waiting for?
Exactly. Why put it off?
It's easy to get overwhelmed by the challenges in education.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And feel like, what can I really do?
But Dr. Duffer reminds us that even small changes can make a difference.
That's a good point.
And you know what we haven't explicitly talked about yet?
What's that?
Leadership.
Ah, yes.
Because throughout these blog posts, Dr. Knopf talks a lot about what effective leadership looks like.
He goes beyond just saying principals need to be good leaders.
Right. He gets into the specifics.
He does. He outlines the qualities and actions that make a difference.
Like what?
Well, one of the biggest things he talks about is vision.
Okay.
Effective leaders have a clear and compelling vision for their school.
A vision for the future.
Exactly, something that inspires people to work towards a common goal.
So it's not just about managing the day-to-day.
No, it's about inspiring people.
To strive for something bigger.
Right. And it's not just about the leader having that vision.
Okay.
It's about getting everyone on board with it.
So collaborative leadership.
Exactly. Decisions are made with input from teachers, staff, students, parents.
Creating that sense of ownership.
Yes. Everyone feels valued and empowered.
And of course, he talks about data.
Of course, data-driven leadership.
Using data to track progress, identify areas for improvement.
Make informed decisions.
Not just relying on gut feelings.
Exactly. He wants to see evidence.
And he gives some pretty practical strategies for school leaders.
Yeah, like elite assessments, strategic planning, professional development.
Fostering collaboration.
All of that. But he also emphasizes that sense of urgency.
We can't just be complacent.
No, the status quo isn't good enough.
We have to keep pushing for better.
We're our students.
And you know what else I really appreciate about Dr. Knopf's writing? He uses all these specific examples and anecdotes.
Oh, yeah, he's a great storyteller.
He is, and those stories bring his ideas to life.
They make them so much more relatable.
Like when he talks about Moneyball thinking.
Yeah, he tells the story of the Oakland A's.
And how they use data to build a winning team.
It makes you want to root for them.
It does, and it makes you think, maybe we can do that in education too.
Exactly.
Or when he's talking about evaluating programs, he compares it to buying a car.
You wouldn't buy a car based on a flashy ad.
You'd want to look under the hood.
Yes, take it for a test drive.
Exactly, be an informed consumer.
And he doesn't shy away from sharing personal stories either.
Oh yeah, those are great.
Like the one about his crazy day as a school psychologist.
The laundromat and the conference where the challenging school visit.
It reminds us that educators are real people.
With real lives.
And real challenges.
It's not all theory and data.
It's about the human element.
And I think that's what makes Dr. Knopf's work so powerful.
He's not just an academic writing from afar.
He's in the trenches with us.
He gets it.
And he's not afraid to challenge us.
To think differently, to push ourselves to be better.
To create schools that are truly equitable and engaging for all learners.
Well said.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Dr. Knopf's work,
Yeah.
I hope you've come away with some new insights.
Some practical strategies.
And maybe even a renewed sense of inspiration.
To make a difference in your own school or community.
Because we all have a role to play.
We do.
And remember, June will be here before we know it.
So what will you choose to do today?
To make a positive impact in the lives of the students you serve.
That's the question.
It is. And on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive.
It's been a pleasure.
As always, and to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey.
We hope you'll continue to tune in.
For more deep dives into the world of idea.
Keep learning, keep questioning.
And keep striving to make a positive impact.
Until next time.
Take care.